I'll go ahead and start. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Like I said, we're about halfway through the program. Woo! So be sure to fill out the Zoom poll that I have there. And let's see, let's go back to this. This is still Aspie Bootcamp Python. We had some debate over whether we are in week 6 or week 5. Since we started on a Thursday, if we count our weeks starting with Thursday, then we're on week 5. But if we count our weeks starting on Monday, then we're on week 6. So I'm sorry if this caused confusion. Huh?
I know the recap was. I know the recap is quick, right?
Yeah, it will be. But also watch the video if you missed the class too. Be sure to raise your hand before speaking, just so I can tell who's talking, because otherwise I'll just hear a random voice. I don't know who it is.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
And what assignments were there?
You'll just have to go back to the slides in the video for that, because I don't want to, spend time going over it.
All right.
Sounds good. Okay, so like I said, we're either week 5 or week 6. Depending on how you count. All right, so yeah, what you need for today, we're just going to use Replit again. I was hoping to do more stuff with Zoom with GitHub, but the hooking GitHub up to Replit isn't, I was hoping we could have like our own little class thing and everyone could see each other's code, but that's just not working how I wanted. So definitely practice GitHub if you want to keep practicing GitHub, and if you want more practice on it, reach out to me and I can send you some more stuff. Okay, just to reiterate, holidays, Monday, July 4th, that's next Monday. We will not have class. We'll have a good time looking at fireworks. And also, if you're interested in working alongside the class, either for extra practice because you want some extra help outside of class, or because you are feeling the class is too slow and you want to do some extra stuff to kind of expand your brain, this Scientific Computing with Python course on Free Code Camp is great. And then here it's like a series of video courses. So I've linked the while and the for loops videos in case you want some extra information on those. Okay, so first, are there any questions just in general about class? And then we'll start up. Not seeing any. And I did say, so just to recap what we did last time, because I did get asked for that. We continued talking about if statements, which we introduced a week ago or a week and a half ago. And so we talked about if statements, and specifically we talked about nesting if statements. So when you have if statements inside of other if statements. And then we also talked about some kind of random but relevant tips that I had for working in Python. So definitely watch that video if you missed it. And now today we're going to jump into loops. So hopefully we feel good about it. I'm reading this poll and it looks like we are kind of tied on how fast the class is going. So definitely fill that out if you want your opinion to be heard. I'll keep it up for a bit. Okay, so let's get into loops then. Loops are basically sections of code that repeat. It's going to be a chunk of code that's indented by itself, kind of like with the if statement. And it's going to repeat or loop over itself. And this can be a specific number of times, or it can be an indefinite number of times. It'll just loop until something happens to make it not loop anymore. So these are, you might hear me say loop over. This just means to repeat. A lot of programmers say that term. So if I say we're going to loop over this code again, that just means we're going to repeat it again in the loop. And why do we need loops? Well, as we talked about some of the assignments that we've had before, if you want to print multiple numbers or something, you kind of have to make your own print statements a bunch of times. And if you find yourself writing the same code over and over and just copy pasting, it's not really efficient. And so we want to be able to avoid this repetitive code of typing the same things over and over, and be able to just tell the computer, hey, I want you to do this 5 times, or I want you to do this until this condition is met. So as an example, you could print the numbers 1 through 5. So instead of just on each line of your Replit saying print 1, print 2, print 3, and so on, you could write a loop that just says print the numbers 1 through 5. And we'll talk about how we can actually do that ourselves. So basically, you're just telling the computer to do a task or a series of tasks a certain number of times. And in Python, there are two basic types of loops. The first one that we'll go over today is called a while loop. And then the second one that we may or may not get to today, but we'll definitely get to on Thursday, is called a for loop. And there are a couple differences between them. So a while loop evaluates, or it goes through a loop based on a condition. We learned about conditional statements that return true or false. We used them with if statements. It's kind of similar, but we don't need the if keyword. We use the while loop to evaluate if a condition is true or false. So like if X is less than 5, it's going to evaluate that condition, and then it's going to loop the code, and then it's going to evaluate that condition again, and then loop again. So this is going to loop an indefinite number of times. I'll go more into detail later. A for loop is a bit different. It loops based on iteration, which is usually a specific number of times. So we're going to go right into while loops. Are there any questions about loops in general? My chair is squeaky. Okay, I don't see any questions immediately. And if you do have questions and I move on, you can still put it in the chat and stuff. I don't mean to rush you with questions. I just don't want to sit here in awkward silence while I wait for people to ask questions. So let me know if you still have questions. But so a while loop will evaluate a condition, and then it will run the code inside the loop. Once it reaches the end of that little code chunk, it will evaluate the condition again. It goes right back up to the top. If that condition is still true, it'll loop again. If it's false, it'll exit the loop. So it's evaluating a condition over and over, and it's only going to run the code inside the loop if that condition is true. So it's kind of like an if statement where we say if condition, if the condition is true, it'll run the code inside there. It won't repeat it like a while loop will. But if it's false, it's just going to skip and go to the next line after the if statement without the indent. So we'll see that in action right here. So here's just a visual example. I kind of like the visual example of charts when we're talking about loops. So you can kind of see, I hope you can see my mouse. Let me know if you can't. But so it's going to start here. So this is the start of our code. And we're going to go to the while loop where it's going to, evaluate a condition. If the condition is true, it's going to do the statements inside, so the code inside. And we're going to follow this arrow over here. It's going to evaluate the condition again. And we're just going to go in the circle for a long time until the condition is false. And then it'll exit the loop. So that's just kind of a visual way of thinking about it, is following a little diagram here. And if you want a code example, we have specific syntax. So here's the while loop syntax. And you've heard me say this before, but I'll go into it again. A syntax is just basically how to write your code. So how you use different commands. So the syntax for while loop is while, then you have this condition here, and colon. You always need your colon. Then you press enter, and you have these two indents again. Of course, it can be as many as you need. And you just have the indented code inside the loop, and then you unindent to indicate that you are now outside the loop. So if this condition is true, it's going to do this line, then this line, then it's going to go back up. It's going to evaluate the condition again. If it's true, this line, go back up, evaluate the condition again. Now, if it's false, it's just going to skip down here. So here's my code example. I have this function here, and I'm actually going to show you this in Replit directly, but first I'm going to walk you through it. So we have our main function. I'm setting my num equal to 0. And now I have my while statement. It says while my num is less than 5, colon, print my num. And then I change my num and I say my num equals my num plus 1. So my num is going to start at 0 while my num is less than 5. My num is less than 5, so it's going to go inside the while loop. It's going to print 0. Now it's going to say my num is equal to 0 plus 1. And we're going to go right back up. While my num is less than 5, well, now my num is equal to 1. And this is going to run until we get to my num equals 4 plus 1. And now it's 5. And 5 is not less than 5. So it will skip that and then end. So let me show you that. Let's see. While loops. All right. So we have our, if you want to code along with me, I'm just on Replit. And I also took screenshots of all of these examples. So don't worry if you missed something. So I'm going to say def main. I'm going to assign my num to equal some number. So like the example, I'm going to say 5. Now I'm going to say while. This starts my while loop. And you can put your condition in parentheses if you want, but you don't have to. Sometimes it's easier. I'm going to say less than 5. While my num is less than 5, colon, enter. And it'll usually indent for you, but if it doesn't, don't forget to indent. Print the number, whoops. And don't forget this step, and we'll talk about it a bit more, but we always want it to be my num equals my num plus 1. Or any number. You just basically want to change this. If you don't change this, if my num, oops, not 5, 0. If my num is equal to 0, and then it goes print my num, and then my num doesn't change, what is going to happen? Anyone want to guess?
Infinite loop.
Yeah, exactly, an infinite loop. And we'll talk about that a bit more, but I'm going to hit run. And so here we go. So it prints out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice it didn't put up 5 because 5 is not less than 5. So does anyone want me to walk through what this while loop does? Or does do we get it? I can go through this again if you want. We're also going to go through more examples. Yeah, sometimes it'll crash. All right, yeah, Richard.
What about like break statements and continue statements and while loops? I know that's probably a few slides ahead, but I was running into problems with that today.
Yeah, so so there are, it's called break statements. So I'm going to put an if statement in here. I'm just going to say if my num equal 3. This is just arbitrary. You can say break, and that will just break out of the while loop. So it won't evaluate this again. If it sees the break, it'll just go straight down here and do some other code. So yeah, I actually don't talk about break or continue statements today, but that's just what they do. It will break out of the loop, but we're not really going to go over that today. Okay, yeah, if your Replit is not working, you may just need to restart it. I can't really fix Replit issues. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is just, could I show you the infinite loop? Yes, definitely. So I think I have that on the slide here. Yep, so that's actually the next slide. So I have this example here. What's next out of that? So the condition in the while loop has to change. If the condition never changes, it's just going to run over and over again. And this is called an infinite loop, like we said before. So in this example here, I have almost the exact same code. I have my num equals 0. I say while my num is less than 5, print my num. But now I don't change it at all. So this will never end. This will keep going and going and going. And let me show you exactly what that will do. So I'm just going to comment this out. That's a good way to check your code or to test stuff, is just put a little comment line there and then it'll be ignored. I'm going to run it. Oh man. Oh no. So if this happens on Replit, you can hit the stop button. You can also hit Control C. So that's just the control button and then C. And that will stop it. It'll say keyboard interrupt. You can also hit the stop button. But yeah, it'll just go. Look at how many zeros it printed out. It was just like, keep printing 0, never stop. A wait function. Yeah, so you can, yeah, so a wait function, sometimes people do that in loops to stop it from going so fast. And that is just, we're not going to learn this today, but the wait is literally just like wait 3, and that waits 3 seconds. So if I wanted to do that, it would wait, technically wait. Oh, maybe you need to import. Sometimes you need time or something. I don't know. It's a different library, but it's literally just like, oh, time.sleep. That's what it is. I'll send that to you, Donovan. But it is called time.sleep. Okay, so yeah, infinite loop's not good. So we need to make sure that we increment. It's called incrementing. And you don't have to do +1. You could do +4. So if I do +4, it won't run quite as many times. Let's see. So it'll just print out 0 and 4, because then once we add 4 for the second time, it's going to be greater than 5. So that's just a bit on infinite loops. The next one that, let's see. Sorry, I'm juggling slides. All right, so yeah, so to avoid infinite loops, you definitely want something like this, like my num equals my num plus 1. If you can also say my num plus equals 1, that's the same thing as saying my num equals my num plus 1. Yeah, time, yeah, that's because you have to import the module. I would just look up time.sleep if you want to see the documentation on it, but yeah, you have to import time. Okay, so while loops. So you want to make sure to avoid this. And you want to make sure that when you add this variable statement to evaluate your condition, when you add this, if I did my num equals my num minus 1, that also would not work because then it will never be greater than 5 and get out of the loop. All right, just checking the chat. Yeah, we've got some talk about import modules, which we haven't covered yet in the class, but we will get to that. Yeah. All right. Yeah, Richard.
Those kind of remind me of Java loops.
Yeah. Richard, did you have a question? Oh, no. Okay, cool. All right, back to the slideshow. Okay, so yeah, we have to make sure that we change this value. And like I said, if you run into code with an infinite loop, press Control-C, it'll end it. Okay, so another one. So here we go. I have x equals 10, while x is greater than 0, print x. And now I can change it by saying x equals x minus 1. So this is just a little countdown function that I wrote, where hopefully it'll say 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. And hopefully it will. And I'm incrementing x by -1. So I'm saying x minus 1. And hopefully once it breaks out, it'll print blast off. And yeah, so I'm seeing some in the
Wonder
chat.
Rocket's countdown. I've seen those on TV.
Yeah, so I'll run this. And I'm seeing in the chat, yeah, some people are comparing it to Java or JavaScript. It's a bit, yeah, Python does loops a bit different. So if you already know a programming language, the loop is going to be similar, but it does work a bit differently. But a lot of pretty much all programming languages have loops in them. So now just a question here. What would happen if I replace this line, the x equals x minus 1, where we're counting down? What if I replace it with x equals x plus 1, where I'm counting up?
Infinite loop.
Yep, another infinite loop. So I have this, thought I had this saved, but what do I write here? X equals 10. So I'm just going to say while x is, what am I doing again? Oh yeah, while x is greater than 0, and x equals x minus 1. And then at the end, I want it to print. Let's see if this goes. Yep. So now we have 10, 9, 8, 7 on the way to blast off. So just a quick little way of showing that you can do, you can add numbers or you can subtract them. And we can do a bunch of other stuff with while loops, but these are kind of the most basic examples. Okay. So now let's go to another example. This one is a bit more complicated, but don't worry, it's not that hard. So I'm gonna do this one right here. I'm gonna ask the user to guess a number. So I'm assigning the secret number. I'm not gonna tell the user what it is, but the secret number is 7. And now I want the user to guess a number. So I'm gonna say guess equals input guess a number. And I am seeing a question here on, is there a way to have it print slower? Yes, it is. What I typed in earlier, you can say import time and then time.sleep 1, or the number inside the parentheses is the number inside parentheses is the amount of seconds that you want it to wait. So if you wanted to do that, you can. We're not going to really get into that today, though. Yeah, Cameron.
I actually made this already where they keep guessing a number and it keeps making them wait until they guess the right one.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. That's great. But yeah, so if we want to do that, we would say the guess is input guess a number. And now we're going to have our while loop where we say while guess does not equal our secret number. Don't forget your colon. Then you want to print incorrect. This might be a bit different from what I had. And then you want to make sure that you ask again inside the loop, because the while loop, it'll just print incorrect and it'll just keep printing it. You never change it. So remember to change it. So you need to ask the user to input another guess. So now you assign guess to be input guess again, or whatever text you want. Okay, and let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yep. And then at the end, I just wanted to show you when it's done, we can say print correct when they guess the right number. So if we want to run this here, it's going to say guess a number. I'm going to guess 10. I'm going to pretend like I don't know what it is. Incorrect, guess again. -13. Incorrect, guess again. Now I'm going to say 7. And it says correct, and it exits that loop. And then we're done. So this is a good way to, it's called validating input. Basically just making sure that input is correct or something. So we'll look at another example where you can look at passwords and check if a user is entering a correct password. But real quick, before I move on to that one, does anyone want to tell me why did I assign secret number to be a string inside quotes instead of an actual number? Like why did I make it 7 in quotes instead of just 7? Oops. So I don't have to change the input. You're not doing any math with number, okay. Because your input is a string. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of good guesses here. Yeah, so I'm seeing, so you want to change the input, and I think I know what you mean there. It's so we don't have to convert it to, when we have this comparison here, the input that we get back, the user's guess, will come back as a string. So guess is a string. If we made secret number an int, then we can't compare those because a string will never be equal to an int. So this won't even compare. I think Python should throw an error. Yeah, so we don't have to cast this. So if we did want to make it so I'm just going to run this to show you what I mean. So this is what it looked like when we had it in quotes as a string. Now I'm going to run it, and it's never going to equal our secret number because guess is a string. If we wanted it to treat both of them as numbers, we could wrap our input in the int function to turn it into an int. And now this should work. I'm baffled as to why this is not working. Did it not save? Okay. It just didn't save. Don't worry. Logic is not broken. Okay, so yeah, so if we wanted to do that, but to save us some typing, save your keyboard some keystrokes, I just put this in quotes so that we can compare it as strings. So are there any questions about that and typecasting? Okie doke. If you have questions, feel free to put them in. But I'll also move on. So now here we go. Here's another one. I just wrote out some random instructions. So in this one, we have, I'm going to print out instructions for the user and then ask if the user wants me to repeat the instructions. And if they say yes, I'm going to repeat the instructions again. And then ask again to change that variable, assign repeat to another value. So asking them, do they want me to repeat it again? Yes or no. And then at the very end, I just want to say thank you for listening to the instructions. So I'm just going to make a variable called instructions. It will be a string. You can put any instructions here. I'm just going to say. And then repeat is going to be our input. We want to say, would you like to see the instructions again? And then I have this little thing here. This is really good for when you're asking for user input and you want it in a specific way. So I don't want the user to actually type yes, Y-E-S, or no, N-O. I just want them to type Y for yes and N for no, just because that's easier for me to check. And then I don't have to worry about capitalization or anything. So this is just, you've probably seen this before where it says do you want to continue Y or N? So that's why I did that there. That's just to indicate how I want their answers to be. And now I'm going to say while repeat, what did I say, does not equal Y? I think that's the example I had, does not equal Y. Yes. Oh, no, equals Y. While repeat equals Y. I'm just going to say print instructions. And then I'm going to change the repeat variable to update it. And I'm just going to copy paste this. So copy, and then paste. Would you like to see the instructions again? And then I want to print listening to the instructions. All right, so let's run this. Would you like to see the instructions again? Yes or no? Oh, I didn't print the instructions at first. Stop. I forgot to say print instructions, and then our codes just started out, would you like to see the instructions again? I don't know, I haven't seen them. Okay, let's see. Raise your hand to talk and see instructions. Would you like to see the instructions again? I'm going to type Y. Raise your hand to talk. And if I just want to keep reading those instructions because I love instructions, I'm going to say Y, and now I'm going to say N to end it. Thank you for listening to the instructions. And it ends. So it just printed this until we said stop. One question for
Can't
you.
you put a space between the end quotation mark and the parentheses?
Yeah, so that is a better thing to do, is to put a space and another line. Mostly just a space is what you need, but you're exactly right. I didn't do that. So yep, and now I have some space to type out my answer. So thank you for that. So one question that I have for all of you is, what would happen if the user didn't type N or Y? If they typed W, what would happen? So look closely at what the while statement is looking for. And then look closely at what the while statement is looking for, and then tell me what will happen if the user enters W or some other letter besides Y or N.
If the user types a W, it's going to repeat the same line again.
If they type a W? Okay, yeah, so I'm seeing some answers coming through. Okay, so yeah, let's try this. So I'm gonna run this. Run. There we go. Would I like to hear the instructions again? I'm gonna say W. So the reason it did this, it just skipped, yep, like some people were saying, went straight to line 11 after the loop. So it didn't do this while loop.
I
But it doesn't matter.
Wrong. It would just print out the ending line.
That's okay. But yeah, so the reason for this is that when our condition here is just if repeat equal Y. So if repeat is Y, then they want us to repeat it again. And in this case, if repeat is anything other than Y, so if I typed N for no, or even I typed R or T or 9 or something, it's not going to equal Y, so we're not going to repeat the instructions. So that's just something to think about when you're making some sort of user validation, is that it may not turn out the way you think, or this is fine. It's like press any key to continue on games or something. So that's just something to keep in mind. I could make this well, repeat does not equal N. So if I want them to press any key to repeat the instructions or press N to stop the instructions, that would work as well. So now if I typed W, it will keep printing it. But if I type Y, it'll keep printing it. But if I type N, then it stops it. So, yep. Awesome. Okay, and yes, I saw a question in there. How do you print an actual backslash? I will print for you an actual backslash. That is just in your quotes. You can just type backslash. Let's see. Oh, whoops. Okay. No. Yep. See, and that types of backslash. So any character that you want to like escape, that's typically a character that Python uses. You just put a backslash in front of it, and that typically works. And you can play around with however many backslashes you want to see what that prints. Just a little side. Okay. Any questions about while loops so far? We're going to go into our assignments for while loops in a bit. Just want to make sure I've got everyone's questions. Looks like we're doing good understanding while loops. If you're not, let me know. You can private message me if you don't want to ask a question in front of the whole class. We're kind of going through this quickly. But I'm going to go ahead and put up task 1 on here. So your task is to create a correct password variable, set what the correct password should be, and then ask the user to enter their password using input. Now you want to use a while loop to check if that password is correct. If it's not, and you want to it'll keep going through that while loop, and continue to ask the user to re-enter their password until they get it correct. And then when the password is correct, print success, or another great message that you want to print. So go ahead and work on that. And then I also have on the next slide an extra task. If you finish this one early, I'm going to give you, we'll do 5 minutes and then check in. And then if people want more time, we can do an additional 5 minutes. So I'm going to set a timer for myself. So at 37, I'm going to check in and see how everyone is doing. And then, but feel free to, while we're all working, feel free to ask questions. So go for it. Okay, how are we doing on this task? Do we have any questions? Do people feel like we need more time, or are you good?
I got it by
You got
myself.
it? Good job. Yeah.
Already done.
Cool. You guys are rocking it. Awesome. All right. So I've got this. And I'm just going to go through it real quick. So if you need more time, now is your last chance to let me know. You can let me know privately if you don't want to speak in front of the whole class. But okay, I'm going to count down to 5. I'm going to count down from 5, and then I'm just going to do this. 5, 4, 3. Yes, Michael.
I think I need more time on this.
More time? Okay, yeah, I'll give you a couple more minutes, and then do you have any questions for me?
For some reason, during the instructions one, it wasn't letting me type. It wasn't letting me use it because I was like, even though I typed it correctly, it said instructions was not defined.
It might be an indentation error. So I would double check all of your indentation.
Like I always have one error every single task.
That's okay. That is actually just a completely normal feeling to have. I feel like that every day in my job. I have at least one error in my code. So don't worry if you're feeling like that. Sometimes programming is just writing out what you think will work and then getting an error and then saying, okay, let me try to fix this one error, and then maybe another error shows up, but eventually you get it. So just keep going. But I'll go ahead and start typing out how I would approach this problem. So first of all, we want to create a correct password variable and set the password there. So I'm going to say correct password equals, I'm going to set it to, I don't know, 1, 2, 3. Now I want the user to enter the password. So I'm going to say, I don't know, user password equals, I want to do an input, oops, enter your password, while, and we want to start a while loop, while user password does not equal correct password. I want to say print correct password. And now the key step here is updating user password. So we want to say user password equals, and we want to have another enter or input statement where you say, and we can add some spacing there so that it looks cleaner. And then once it is correct, we want to print success. All right, does anyone have questions about how I approached this or how I did it? I'll go ahead and run it. I'll be thinking of questions if you have some. Okay, so Michael, did that help you at all? Or
I'm still typing this in.
okay. Why didn't you make the first print in the while statement the input? It's just a personal choice. You can do that if you want. So yeah, that's a good point. I could just say, I could just add incorrect password, enter your password. I could just put it there and it should function about the same. So that was just because it's how I typed it out, but you can also just get rid of that entirely and just have your input statement. So yay. So yeah, just personal choice. There's usually more than one way of solving a programming puzzle. So sometimes people do it a bit differently. That's totally good. Okay, any questions about this? And I will spend some time at the end. We have like 20 minutes left. So I will spend some time at the end of the class if you want. I can go over this in more detail. Okay, I had this extra at the end of class. If you're interested and you want to stick around, I can tell you how to do this extra one. Okay, so just a basic review of while loops. They're going to execute a set of statements. As long as a condition is true, it's always going to evaluate that condition. It's going to check that condition first before it does anything, in the loop. And then if that condition is true, it's going to run the code in the loop. Once it reaches the end of the loop, it's going to evaluate the condition again. It's going to go back up to the top of that loop. And then if the condition is true or false, if it's false, the loop will not run, but if it's true, it'll run again. And it'll keep doing that until the condition is eventually false, and then it'll just continue on with the code. So that is our review of while loops. Do we have any overarching questions about the while loops? And then I'm going to touch on for loops, and we're going to talk a bit about for loops, and then I'm going to go over the tasks that I had if anyone has questions or wants to go more in detail. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. I don't know. It's hard for me. Okay, if you have questions and you're not putting them in, email me or something, or like DM me or something, because I don't know how fast to go if no one is giving me questions. If you don't have questions, that's totally fine. I just want to shout out that I'm going to go faster if I don't see any questions. Just so you're aware. Because if no one has questions, then it looks like everyone's doing great. But if you're struggling, let me know. Don't be a silent struggler. Okay, looks like there's no questions. So I'm going to, for real, get into for loops. Now these, unlike while loops, which checks a condition, for loops are based on iteration, which just means it's going to repeat a specific number of times. So instead of just going indefinitely until some condition is met, a for loop will repeat a very specific number of times. So we say that it iterates over items, and this can be a range of numbers. This could be letters in a string. It can be items in a list, which we haven't talked about lists yet. We will talk about them. You can click on this link if you want to read more about lists, but sometimes for loops use lists. And it's going to execute the code chunk inside the loop once for each item in what we call your collection. So it kind of sounds weird when you just talk about it, so I'm going to show you some examples afterwards, but I just want to get into kind of a visual example and then like an explanation of what's going to happen. So let's say that we want to print the numbers 1 through 4. So we're going to say like for the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, I want you to print that. So we're going to start here. Here's the start of our loop. It's going to say, is there an element in our collection? It's like 1, 2, 3, or 4. If yes, we're going to execute the code. It's going to ask again if there's another element remaining in the collection or an item in the collection. If yes, execute the code, go back. And it's going to keep doing this until you're out. So as soon as it has printed all numbers 1 through 4, and then once we're out of numbers, it's going to say no, and it's going to stop the loop. So I know that's kind of a weird way of thinking about it. It's very different from a while loop, but I'll show you some examples. First, I want to show you like the structure of it. So the basic syntax for loops is you're going to say for item in collection. And these italicized ones will not actually say item or collection, but it'll be something else, and I'll show you. But the keywords are for and in. So for, lets Python know you're starting a for loop, kind of like when we used while. Item is the iterator variable. This can have any name. It's just the iterator. It's what your code is going to execute once per item. So most often it's just named I. It's not going to be an actual variable that you really use unless you say like print I. You're just saying for some number in the value range 1 through 4, for example.
Like I equals 0, I is less or greater than the variable, then I plus plus, so I minus minus.
Yeah, exactly. So that is, for anyone unfamiliar, that is how you would do it in a programming language like JavaScript or C or C++.
Just
but in Python,
Java for short.
Yeah, in Python, it's a bit different. Python likes to make things simpler. So we're going to say for item in, Now, in is another keyword in Python. It's typically used before loops, and it's just saying what collection you want to loop over. And then the collection that I've been talking about is the set of items that you want to iterate over. So like I was saying, print the numbers 1 through 4. I want to say for I in 1 through 4. So just an explanation of what all of these different parts of the code mean. And then here is another function that you typically use. So when we say for item in, usually this part, the collection part, is going to be range. So range is how you set the number of times the code should loop. And range is literally just a range of numbers. So you can say for I in range, open and close parentheses, 0, 5. And so this range function, inside the parentheses, it takes 2 numbers. It can take 1 number, but I'm just going to talk about 2. It'll take your starting number, so like 0, and then your ending number, so 5. And in this one, the starting number is inclusive, meaning it will start on that number, and then the ending number is exclusive, meaning that it will go up to that number, but not actually include that number. So these are separated by commas, you can see here. And like I said, inclusive versus exclusive. The first number, the starting point, it will start on that number, then it'll go up to the ending point, but not actually at the ending point. And you can optionally add a third number to indicate how you want to count by. So the default is to count by 1. So starting at 0, count to 5 by 1. So you say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it stops because 5 is exclusive. If you add a third number here, then this will be how you want to count by. So this 0, 11, 2 would go from 0 to 10 because it's going to stop before it reaches 11, and it's going to count by 2. So this is going to be 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So this is probably your main tool that you're going to use with for loops is for I
skip
in
counting.
range. What?
It's skip counting.
It what?
It's called skip counting.
Skip counting. Yes, that is the word for it.
This tells us that even odd number in the pattern.
Yeah, it's a really good way for finding patterns. If you want to count by 2s or 3s or something. So here is an example of for loop. So like I said, for I in range 0, 5, if you're doing in numbers, and you have your code inside the loop and then code outside the loop. Code inside the loop is indented, code outside the loop is not. So here's my example that I kept talking about. I say for I in range 0, 5, print I. So this will just print all the numbers between 0 inclusive and 5 exclusive. So let me show you that. So I'm going to say, and so you don't need to initialize a variable or anything like you did with while loops. We can just start off right with our for loop. We can say for I in range 0, 5, and I. Let's run this. And there we go, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And like I said, it won't print 5. If we want it to print 5, we need to have it go from 0 to 6. Okay, so that's how your basic for loop. And before I move on to other examples, do we have questions? Why does it not print 5? Yeah, that's a great question. So the reason it doesn't print 5 is right back to this inclusive versus exclusive. It's just the way the range function works, where the first number you enter is the starting point, and it will start on the starting point. But the ending point, it won't, it'll stop before it gets to it. So once it gets to that number, it stops the loop. And that's just the way that the range function works. It's just something to remember that it's inclusive at the beginning and then exclusive for the end point. What makes it exclusive? It's nothing like specifically makes it exclusive. It's just the range function, how it's like defined in Python. Like whoever made it said, I want it to be exclusive. And I don't really know why, because that is a bit frustrating. It doesn't 100% make sense, because it would make sense if you wanted it to print 5 to actually have 5 there. But whoever made Python, I forget his name, it was one guy, he said, make it like this. Sorry. But yeah, good question. Oh yeah, Michael.
So what do you want to do if you don't want to print 0? Just start with 1.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So you can start at any number. So you can say for I in range 1, and then this will print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these numbers here can really be anything. We'll even talk about how you can make it count down instead of up. But yeah, you could start at from I in range 5 to 10 or something, and then it'll start at 5. But yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Any others?
No,
What
that's
if you
it.
want to find a function to use functions to find numbers divisible by 3 or 2 or any number?
Yeah. So that is actually one of the examples that I have is finding numbers divisible by 3. But you can do a couple different ways. I don't want to give them up. I don't want to give the answer yet because I have that as an assignment. But that's a good thing to think about. How would you check if you want to use this for loop to print only the numbers divisible by a certain number? So I'm being mysterious on purpose. All right, we have the syntax. Okay, so now, like I said, we can ask range to count by negative numbers if we want. So if we use this third one to say -1, it'll actually count down. So let me show you that. So if we want to print for I in range 20 to 1, and then count by is our optional third argument. It's called an argument when you type something in here in parentheses, -1, print I. So now I'm going to run this and it'll count backwards. So it'll start on 20, go to 1, count by -1. And there we go. So that's how you can count backwards with for loops. And my other example that I have here before our tasks. Yes, Scott.
So then what would happen if you tried to count downward, but you didn't add the third argument? Would it just skip from 20 to 1 or?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see.
Oh.
It doesn't like that.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. So yeah, make sure that you put, it's because the default here is, so like when you don't type anything there, Python just assumes you want 1. And
And
then,
of course,
yeah,
count
it just
up
doesn't
from
work.
20 to 1.
Yeah. So yep, doesn't do anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That's a really good question. It's always good to ask like, what will happen if I type this in instead of this? So yeah, great question. So another thing that we can iterate over, we don't have to use the range function. We can actually iterate over strings. So it'll iterate over each letter in the string. So if we wanted to do kind of a similar thing here, we could do it with our names. So I'm going to say name equals Miranda. And you can say you could say for I in name. In this example, I said for letter in name. You can, this variable here can be called anything. A lot of people just say I, but if you want it to have some sort of meaning so that someone reading your code understands what's happening, you can make it say letter or whatever you want. So now I'm going to say for letter in name, print letter. So this should just print all of the letters in my name on different lines. And yep, there it is, Miranda. So you can do that with strings too. If you don't really use it often with strings, it's just an interesting thing that you can. Most often you'll be using the for I in range. So that was kind of just an interesting example. If anyone has questions on how to use it with strings, let me know. But otherwise, we are ready for our for loop task. And for this task, I want you to use a for loop to print positive numbers. So don't go negative, but use a for loop to print numbers less than 25 that are divisible by 3. And I'm going to give you a hint here. Use an if statement inside your loop. There's another way to do that, which I've added as an extra challenge, is do that same task without using if statements. But for this one, I want you to use an if statement inside a for loop to print positive numbers less than 25 that are divisible by 3. Yeah, so the I can be anything. I'm just seeing that in the chat. So typically we call it I. It'll work just the same. Oops, except you need to make sure you say print I then. But it will still work if you name it I or if you name it X. As long as you don't name it a variable that you already have. So if I say for name in name, that won't work. It might do something weird. Oh, I guess that, okay, apparently that does work. So yeah, it could be anything. So I'll have this task up. You guys can work on it until 7 or whatever time it is at the top of the hour for you. Let me know your questions if you have some, and then if you are done with task 2, you can move on to the extra one. And then at 7, if anyone's interested, I will go through the tasks that we did today, and I'll just show you how I would do them. So divisible, answering a question in the chat, divisible means it is a number perfectly divides into another
I
number.
think I got it. Let's skip counting.
Oh, good job. Yeah. You answered your own question. Yeah, so divisible means, yeah, perfectly divided by another number. So I'm going to type. So like 12 is divisible by 3. 18 is divisible by 3. So the notes are always in either the notes resources channel on Discord and also on the Google Calendar invite for the day.
I also got the extra task done as well.